Good day, everyone. We are the Group 4 and we will be discussing about our chosen topic, space tourism. By the way, I am Ranalyn Algahuman and together with me is Mr. John Greg Dumanon, Ms. Francila Kale Espirido, Ms. Maxine Grace Gabusa, and Ms. Tina May Gilot.
So I will be discussing what is space tourism. Space tourism or space flight is the recent phenomenon of space tourists, or best termed as space flight participants, paying for flights into space. It is another niche segment of aviation industry that seeks to give tourists the ability to become astronauts and experience space travel for recreational, leisure, or business purposes. Space tourism is a human space travel for recreational purposes. It is sometimes referred to as citizen space exploration, personal space flight, or commercial human space flight, and it covers several types of space flights, which are suborbital, orbital, and even beyond Earth orbit, which I will discuss on the next slide. There are several different types of space tourism, namely orbital, suborbital, and lunar space tourism. First, orbital space tourism. For you to be in orbit, you have to be going around the planet continually, moving fast enough that you will keep circling. A good way to picture this is to imagine a ball being thrown at ground level. At a normal throwing speed, the ball travels in an arc through the air before hitting the ground. But say you were to put a little rocket on the ball that made it travel so fast that its arc shape would perfectly match the curvature of the Earth. At that point, the ball would have achieved orbit and would fly at a consistent height above our planet. It is actually this incredibly high speed which makes orbital space flight technically so complex and therefore expensive. Second, orbital space tourism. You blast off to a certain height that depends on its speed, make a huge arc, and at the top of their flight arc, passengers in a suborbital vehicle will still achieve a few minutes of weightlessness. They are, in fact, falling back toward Earth, but they are experiencing free fall, similar to an airplane completing parabolic maneuvers to simulate zero gravity. Third, lunar space tourism. It is a tour on or around the moon. In the future decade, trips to the moon might follow at a later period.
Possible attractions for space tourism. There are three types of space tourism: orbital space tourism, suborbital space tourism, and lunar space tourism. Orbital space tourism allows the space participants to experience the thrill and awe of looking at the space while traveling around the Earth's orbits for days or weeks. Secondly, suborbital space tourism allows the space participants to experience to see the tinkle-free star field and a vista of the curved Earth below for a short period of time. And lastly, lunar space tourism. This allowed the space participants to experience the view of the far side of the moon. In addition, this allowed the space participants to experience the view of the Earth rising and setting against the lunar horizon. And lastly, this allowed the space participants to experience and witness the list of artificial materials and extraterrestrial body on the moon. In conclusion, these space attractions will allow the space participants to gain experience to the new environment, such as the feeling of weightlessness.
We know that when we talk about space tourism, it sounds so imaginative and futuristic. But did you know that there were already programs that been proposed and been approved, and now it became one of the successful programs under space tourism? So in the following two slides, we'll be discussing about the successful programs in the field of space tourism. To start off, One of the successful programs under space tourism is the Soviet Space Program. It is the national space program of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics or USSR, conducted in competition with its Cold War adversary, the United States, known as space race from the mid-1950s until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in year 1991. Over its 38-year history, the Soviet program achieved the first intercontinental ballistic missile, first satellite, first animal in Earth orbit, first human in space and Earth orbit, first woman in space and Earth orbit, first spacewalk, first moon impact, first image of the far side of the moon and uncrewed lunar soft landing, first space rover, first sample of the lunar soil that has been automatically extracted and brought to Earth, and the first space station. Next is the U.S. Space Shuttle Program. This is the fourth human space flight program carried out by the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration or NASA. This program has accomplished routine transportation for Earth to orbit, crew, and cargo from 1981 to 2011. Then next is the Project Juno. This is a privately funded campaign which Helen Sharman to be the first Briton in space. This program was almost cancelled because they failed to raise the funds required, but Mikhail Gorbachev ordered it to proceed under the Soviet expense in the interest of the international relations. Next is the Spaceship One. This is an experimental air-launched rocket-powered aircraft with suborbital spaceflight capability at speeds of 3,000 feet per second using a hybrid rocket motor. Because all of the scaled composites won the $10 million prize in October 2004 for being the first private company to reach and surpass an altitude of 100 km twice within 2 weeks. To start in this slide, we'll be discussing first the New Shepard. New Shepard is a vertical takeoff, vertical landing or VTVL crew-related suborbital launch vehicle. It was developed by Blue Origins and its name was originated from the first American astronaut in space, Alan Shepard, who ascended to space in 1961 on a suborbital trajectory similar to New Shepard. Blue Origin plans to ferry a maximum of 6 persons on a brief journey to space on board the New Shepard. Next is the Mercorp. This is a space station that operated in low Earth orbit from 1986 to 2001, operated by Soviet Union and later by Russia. It was the first modular space station and was assembled in orbit from 1986 to 1996. Lastly, the Virgin Galactic. This is an American space flight that is founded and aims to provide suborbital space flights to space tourists. Virgin Galactic suborbital spacecraft are air-launched from beneath a carrier airplane known as White Knight 2.
Now moving on to future plans and programs, starting with Boeing Starliner, which is a 21st century space capsule. It is used to transport crew to the International Space Station. It accommodates 7 passengers and it features wireless internet and tablet technology for crew interfaces. The said capsule is reusable up to 10 times with a 6-month turnaround time. The B330 on the other hand is a house designed for space. Usually life support systems has only one toilet to deal with the grosser parts of being human. But B330 has not one but 2 toilets. It also has a showering area where you can sanitize napkins and scrub down cloths. There are also sleeping bags on the wall for passengers to catch some shut eye while being strapped at their quarters. We also have Aurora Space Station that offers space tourists for a 12-day stay in a low Earth orbit. With Aurora Space Station, guests would be able to free float, look out on window, practice hydroponics, and play in a hologram deck. Action Mission 1 is a space travel that is a lifelong dream of each one of us. It is a next step in human space exploration that focuses on advancing science, education, and humanity. We also have free return trajectory that is designed to intersect the atmosphere. Lastly, we have Deep Space Expedition Alpha, which is the first space tourist to fly around the moon.
We now go on to the next slide, which is the pros and cons of space tourism. First, pros is that humans are curious creatures. So in general, we as humans are curious creatures and want to learn and explore. Next is that space travel provides endless opportunities. So space travel also gives us the opportunity to always experience and explore new things. In fact, space is too big that we humans will never be able to explore all of it. Next is that humans can learn humility from space travel. So space exploration is not only important for humanity as a whole, but it is also crucial on a country level. Many people might not know it yet, but space provides us with pretty high amounts of resources. And the country that conquers those resources will likely have quite a lot of power over the decades and centuries. On the other hand, on the cons side, it is very obvious that space travel can be very dangerous. And also, it implies significant air pollution. So, in order to launch a rocket, it takes a large amount of fossil fuels. So, if large amount of fossil fuels will be burned, then large amount of fine particles are emitted into our atmosphere. So it is not only implies significant air pollution, but also it implies waste production. On this slide, we will be tackling about the 13 things you should know if you want to be a space tourist one day. Who knows, right? The sky's the limit. Anyways, the first one is that your only job on the flight will be to kick back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Second, but you will want to make sure you are physically and mentally fit. So it is very hard for us to go to space if you are mentally or physically ill. It's not just about physical fitness. Mental fitness is key too. So the astronauts think that through fitness comes mental acuity as well. The third is the gravitational forces experienced on launch and re-entry are not as intense as you might expect. So the gravitational forces aren't nearly as bad as they show in the movies. So if you're good enough to be given medical approval to go on a trip like this, you're not going to have any problems handling the gravitational forces. Also, to make launch and re-entry as comfortable on your body as possible, you'll want to physically relax your muscle so you don't fight against the gravitational forces. So the next thing you should know is to prepare for weightlessness, you should book a zero-G flight. So this zero-G flight is provided from the company for us to be able to experience what it's like in space. But if you cannot afford that, we can also learn how to scuba dive, because although it is not exactly like floating in space, it is a pretty good way to practice moving around in weightlessness. This will also prevent us from having long-term effects of weightlessness. And moving in weightlessness comes to you very quickly when you spend time underwater. So it is a very good alternative way to experience what it's like. So the next thing you should know is to come up with a game plan for your few minutes in space. We should have planned out exactly how you want to spend your time up there, because of course it will be time consuming if ay pa ta mag-decide kung unsa tong buhaton dito. So if you want to do do astronaut tricks, you have to plan it from here before we go onto space. So the next thing is we do not have to worry about taking our own photos, because aside that it is very difficult for us to move wearing a suit, and also it is very difficult because we are weightless. You do not have to worry about taking your own photos because the company will provide you good photos for memory purposes. The next is when you get into zero gravity, you might feel a little dizzy because the body functions a little bit differently when you remove gravity from the equation for a sustained period of time. One effect is that you will feel dizzy and you're going to feel full-headed because there's no longer gravity pulling fluid down into your legs. If you're spending a few days in space, be prepared for some bumps and bruises. If you're going to spend a few days or even few weeks up in space, you're probably going to bump your head more than once, no matter how much you're trained for the experience. You're also going to make a mess, especially when you're going to the toilet. It is very hard for you to discharge, and then also if you're going to eat and when you brush your teeth, it is very difficult, so you will going to make a mess, obviously. Next is if you're going to do a spacewalk, the stakes are much higher for you and your crew. So if you're going on a spacewalk outside your spacecraft, of course it will be very dangerous and the risks are higher because you're just going to float and then you are not in control of your body, so it requires extensive training. So the second to the last thing you should know is if you're going in a capsule, be prepared for a bumpy landing. While the only way up to space is via rocket, there are two ways to come back down, via winged vehicle or via capsule. So if you're going into a capsule, there will be a parachute that will come out, and you can expect to get jostled around a fair amount, so that can be disorienting. Of course, when you're hitting on the ground, you will smack onto the ground very hard. Last but not the least is that it'll be worth every penny. So even though this trip is quite expensive, it will change your lives forever because the memories and the experiences will never be forgotten.
Thank you so much for listening, and we hope that you have gained new insights from our topic, space tourism. God bless and keep safe always.